Good to see you. Hey, we are in this Sabbath rest series, so we may need push it all the way up there. There you go. We may need a backup microphone here in a second, if anybody's got a backup microphone. We're in the Sabbath rest series talking about just the rhythms of rest, and we've been out the last few weeks talking about that, and I am so honored this morning. We have my good friend Moshe all the way from Israel here to join us. We'll get you one in just a second. It's coming. And so all the way from Israel. I'm so excited because I've wanted to introduce Moshe to you for so long now, and it's one of those things that, he lives in Israel, he's only here at certain times, and we were able to work it out in the schedule because we've been talking about Sabbath. Really, for me, it started 2015, went on a trip, and Moshe was offering a free trip for pastors to go to Israel. You can't turn down a free trip to Israel, right? I mean, that's just something like, yes, I'll be there. And so we went on this trip. I went with some pastor friends of mine, and I'm not just overselling this. I'm not trying to be over dramatic on it. It was the greatest experience of my life, the greatest trip of my life, to be where, the Bible took place, to see it lived out, to be on the Mount of Olives as you see where the last days of Jesus, Gethsemane is right before you, and the Old City of Jerusalem, and all the things happened was just life-changing for me. And in the last few years, I've developed a good friendship with Moshe, and it's just been an incredible relationship that we've been able to build and have together. And Moshe is a rabbi and a tour guide there in Israel, and so if you go with a trip, you'll be able to be with him. I do want to say this before we kind of jump in today. If you're interested on going on a trip with us, this is kind of the last time to jump into this trip. It's April 29th through May 7th coming up. This is really the last week. You can stop by the Connection Corner. We would love for you to join us. It is really, if you look at Israel trips, it's the cheapest possible Israel trip you can find. And we've bare bones. It's like $3,500, airfare included, which is amazing. Entrance fees into everything. The only thing you take care of is lunch. All your breakfast and dinner is included. You go to the Sea of Galilee, the Old City of Jerusalem. Moshe is the best tour guide I have ever been around, and so you're going to hear from him in a minute once we get a microphone for you. And then you'll hear all of the wisdom that he has, and it really just is an incredible trip. And so if you're interested on that, you can go by there. He's also, his organization, the Global Alliance of Israel, he's selling raffle tickets out there, $10 a piece at the Connection Corner. The winner gets free trips to Israel if you want to join. Oh, it's working. Sweet. We're good. Introduce yourself real quick. What you do, talk about your family.
Okay, first of all, thank you very, very much. And as Matt said, I'm the best tour guide he ever had. I think I'm the only one he ever had. But
not true.
In Israel, not true. Okay,
that's true. In Israel.
Anyhow, it's really it is such a amazing pleasure to be here. It's I never would think something like this could happen until I moved to Israel 10 years ago from Miami. I'm from New Jersey originally. I never had a conversation with a Christian in my entire life. So it is always amazing to me to be sitting in a Christian audience in a church. And I grew up in the Jewish community where I went to Jewish schools, Jewish summer camps, Jewish university, never interacted with Christians. I'm not going to get into why now. Maybe that's another time you'll have me back, maybe. But we moved to Israel, and when I did the tour guide course, I met my first Christians when I guided them. And it opened up a whole new avenue for me. Having moved to Israel as a rabbi, it's the worst career move you can possibly make. It's like a snowflake moving to Alaska. It just doesn't really work well. So I had to find a new career.
Moshe does stand-up comedy. He did. He got rated the funniest rabbi in New York.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like being the funniest rabbi in Tulsa. That's not like that's like a lot of competition. Me and two other guys maybe, but. Anyhow, so I forgot even what I was saying. Oh, yeah. So moved to Israel. So I became a tour guide, and I met Christians for the first time. And that opened up a whole new career, so to speak, for me. And that is I decided that God has led me to try to build bridges between our two great faith communities, that for 2,000 years, that relationship was not a good one, and oftentimes turning violent and deadly. So I've really dedicated my life to that. And as part of that, organization that I started, one of the premier programs is this free trip to Israel for pastors, and that's like Pastor Matt said, that's where we met, and it's really amazing how much rabbis and pastors have in common. It's amazing how much Jews and Christians have in common, that unfortunately, we've kind of sidestep that. And something I should have mentioned at the service this morning, one of the things that's heavily on the mind of the Jewish community now is the rise of anti-Semitism worldwide in general, but also in the United States in particular, with what happened in Pittsburgh and so on, and things that are happening all the time. So this kind of work is so important to, we feel that we don't stand alone anymore. We have partners in the Christian community, and we're grateful.
Yeah. We've learned so much from each other, because we obviously know our differences, but it's also, we've been in each other's context. Like, I've been in his house and, where you live, and worship with him, and there's times where I'm like, hey, help me understand this, right? I don't understand. And then he'll lean over to me and be like, why do you guys do that? And it's just this great relationship where we've been able to learn, and I've learned so much about the Bible through his perspective and his understanding of the Torah and the Old Testament specifically, and how it's made the New Testament come alive for me in a deeper way. So
yeah, so we hope some of you will join us in Israel. We did in 2017. A group from this church came, and
right.
It's literally, as Pastor Matt said, you can't stand on the Mount of Olives, look at Gethsemane, look at the room of the Last Supper, look at the Temple Mount, go on a boat ride in the Sea of Galilee, and be the same. Whether you're a Jew or a Christian, you can't look at these sites and be the same. Sarah Palin looks out her window, she sees Russia. I look out my window, I see Bethlehem. And it's like amazing. It's just unbelievable,
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit about me. There's my family up there.
Yeah.
I miss them dearly. That's the skinny version of me. You know what an Israelite is? An Israelite is an Israeli with 10% off. So that's all right.
That got a good laugh. Yeah.
I'll be here all week. Thank you very much.
Go to Israel for 7-8 days. You'll hear better ones than that. So.
Yeah, you'll be dying to leave after 7 days.
One of the reasons I specifically wanted Moshe to come and speak on this concept, we've been learning about these Sabbath rests and these rhythms of rest. And I'll be honest, one of the things that shocked me the most, both times I've been to Israel, a lot of times the tour guides, the Christian tour guides, they leave during the Sabbath or Shabbat. So sundown on Friday night to sundown on Saturday night. And so they leave and go to different places. Well, with Moshe, he allows us to stay there. And we actually were at the Western Wall on the night of Shabbat praying. And then we would walk to a family's house to have Shabbat dinner with them. And we got to go through the Sabbath time and the rhythms with him. And when I left Israel, and when I left that time, here's what came into my head. My thought was, you know what? We are missing out on an incredible gift of Sabbath because we simply don't value it. I'm not telling you to leave today and it needs to be a 24-hour period in your life. I'm telling you that this biblical concept of Sabbath, of rest and renewal, is key. Not only to the Old Testament, but also how Jesus talks in the New Testament. He doesn't abolish it and fill it and say, get away with it. He says, what's the heart behind it? You are designed to rest. And I looked at the beautiful rhythms of the Jewish people, and honestly, I was jealous of it because we simply don't value that. And we go so fast and so busy. And when they stopped, I saw the beauty in so much of what happened. And I just talk a little bit about what it looks like and what you guys do and leading up to it.
Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of a paradigm of what our Sabbath looks like, because it might be surprising. But basically, there are two categories. There's the things that we do and the things that we don't do. And they're very much related to each other because the things we don't do are meant to create the atmosphere and the spirit of the day. So let me start with that, and just by analogy to understand, like if you play a sport, there's a bunch of things you can't do in any sport you play. And the reason why you can't do them is that it creates the game. It's not because someone wants to restrict you, but it's in order to create that experience. So, for example, things that we don't do on the Sabbath include anything that has to do with using electricity. So, for example, we don't use our cell phone on the Shabbat, the Sabbath. We don't even touch it. You can't even have it in your pocket. We don't turn lights on and off. We have to set them before the Sabbath. We don't turn the TV on or off. The TV's off the entire Sabbath. No computers. We don't go to the movies. We can't use a car. Ignition, right? Can't burn a fire on the Sabbath. We don't use a car. So all of that said, I want you to know that this holds the greatest hope for humanity because we are enslaved to technology. So what does the Sabbath look like? Friday, my wife, before the Sabbath begins, lights candles with my daughter, bringing the light of spirituality, of godliness into the home. And then we walk together as a family to the synagogue. Okay, we pray in the synagogue Friday nights about an hour, then we walk home as a family. Do you understand, as a kid walking to the synagogue with my sisters and my parents, the amount of conversation we had, and no one talking on the phone as they're walking. And then Sabbath in the morning, similar, walking to and from the synagogue. In the afternoon, walking to and 6 times we walked. We probably spent anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half talking just in those walks. The average American family speaks 26 minutes a week, according to Newsweek, parents and children. It's nothing. So then we come home Friday night after the synagogue, and we have a very special meal. Now, no one's running. No one's sitting there with their phone. No one's leaving. Kids are not saying, I have to go meet my friends to go to the movies. No one's going out. There's nowhere to go. You can't get in your car. You can't go anywhere. So what do? We start the meal with a beautiful blessing. We bless each of our children. The mother puts her head on each child's head. The father, I put my hands on the head of the children. We give them each their own special blessing. We have this beautiful meal. We sing songs. We discuss the Bible. The children come home with sheets from school that they read a thought from the Bible. And we discuss, we sing, we sit there for a couple hours. We have friends over to join us for the meal sometimes. When I was with Pastor Matt, we joined a family. And then when the meal ends, if it's the winter with the Shabbat, it's dark early on a Friday in the winter, we then go to the living room, we sit, we read with our children, we play board games. I was saying that one of the few communities left in the world that play board games are the Jews, right? Most people are on Fortnite or whatever. We're playing board games, right? And we fight over things that we could easily Google during the week. So. So, it's great. You're fighting over, how many Jews live in Turkey? I don't know. I think there's 20. I think there's 8,000. Just Google it. We can't use the computer. So you fight for 24 hours. The first thing you do after Shabbat's over, you check Google, and then you call your cousin. See, I was right. So, but it's an amazing thing. We sit there, focus on the humanity. Focus on humanity, all the things that make you a human being. And the idea of resting on the Sabbath is resting from creative activity. So, for example, I put it in this way: anything a monkey can do, those are the things we don't do on the Shabbat. So a monkey eats food. So we eat, but a monkey doesn't grow wheat, cut wheat, prepare wheat, grind the flour, bake bread. So we don't cook on the Shabbat. We don't bake bread. Things that are creative, right? Whatever God did in the 6 days then he rests on the 7th. So we mimic that. And the rest means we rest from creative activity, to say that God is the ultimate creator and that I am not the ultimate creator. I link into the divine.
That's good.
So
I
those are some thoughts.
Both times as I joined in with these rhythms, I was taken back by it. I remember we walked from the Western Wall to maybe a mile to Rabbi Aaron. He's not a pastor, he's a rabbi. Aaron House to eat with him, and I think your son Akiva was with us at one time, and just the conversations that we had, and the rhythms that we were involved in, the blessing over the children, watching the children be present with the families, the meals. I remember on Saturday afternoon, we were walking through the old city of Jerusalem. It's still Shabbat. Kids are outside playing with each other. Everybody's taking a nap. Like everybody's resting. There's just this general kind of rhythm of life that I think I was going into it thinking man, it's going to be all about the rules and regulations, and really it was about the gift of the quiet and the community that they received, and it changed. It changed my perspective of it. And next week I'm going to talk about what Jesus says about the Sabbath, because he doesn't do away with it at all, and how we can live that out. But I was just so taken back by it, and it was something that when I left, I was like, man, how do we take back and develop those rhythms that bring life,
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It holds incredible hope for humanity and for our relationship with the divine. And I'm not here to tell you that you need to observe the Sabbath like me, but I would encourage everyone in the world to take time off from the technology that was meant to help us, but in a way it's really enslaved us. Do you know how many times that the average person looks at their phone during the day? Does anybody know a number? Throw out a number. Somebody yell out a number. What? 70. Well, you were at the last service.
Somebody said 70.
Okay.
Said 70.
It's actually 150. That's the average. 150 times you look at our cell phone during the day. And there's actually an app, I think, that you can. I don't even want to download it. I'm afraid to. But 150 times a day we're looking at our phones. So if I could encourage you, so just take any day of the week you want. You want to take 2 hours and don't look at your cell phone, put it down and turn it off. See how that changes your life, what that does for you. My kids, they go to their room, and I'm not worried they're going to look on their phone or they're going to use their computer. It's a complete commitment to it. And it's one of the most beautiful things. We cannot imagine surviving without the Sabbath. There's a saying that says, as much as the Jews have kept the Sabbath, it is the Sabbath that has kept the Jews. A very famous Jewish philosopher said that. And through the generations, that's how we know. Do you know there are 3 pillars in a Jewish family? One is the Sabbath. One is the laws of kosher, meaning what goes in your mouth has to be certified as kosher. Also, what comes out of your mouth should as well. And the third part is what's called the laws of family purity, which has to do with the laws between man and woman. This is a kids program, so we're not going to talk about that. But those are the 3 pillars, because the family, the home, is the central part of how values are exchanged. How we sit and eat as a family, how husband and wife relate, and the Sabbath, how we spend our time.
Yeah, I need you to come back for our marriage series.
Oh, okay.
And talk about that. No, seriously.
Yeah,
the sexual
powerful.
relationship between man and woman is powerful. Right. There was a guy in our church this week. We were having lunch, and he kind of made a remark, kind of jokingly to me. He said, how hard it's hard work to keep the Sabbath, how hard this has been. And it's one of those things that it takes so much intentionality for you, because, again, I always say this, what's in the optional category of your life never gets done, because we're always stretched to the max. There's always so much that needs to be done. We always push it away. And to bring those times and rhythms back into your life are going to take work. It's a beautiful rest that you get to be in, but how many know that with the first time that you do it, in the silence and not having technology, there's a pull on your heart to those things, right? There's a pull. I mean, like I said, go without your phone for 2 hours. You feel yourself pulled toward it. Some of you, there's a new disorder called nomophobia, right? It's a fear of not having your phone. I mean, it's a real thing. That's like a clinical psychology thing. And so you feel that pull. And sometimes in that empty space, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to come face to face, and you have to push through that. And here's what I always believe about Sabbath. Once you start practicing Sabbath, you realize how much you need it. You don't realize it on the other side of things. You're just busy, and you're hurried, and everything's fast-paced. But in the midst of it, and what we've learned the last few weeks, if you've been here, it's in that space of Sabbath rest that spiritual transformation happens, that life happens, that renewal happens, that allows you to love people well. Right, to fulfill the greatest commandment, to love God and love others.
Right. Do you know that in the Hebrew Bible, there's not one single person that's called holy. The very first thing in the Bible that's called holy is in Genesis chapter 1. In the very end of chapter 1, it says, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. The only thing that's called holy is time. It's an amazing thing, because we all know human beings have the capacity to be holy, but also we know have the capacity to be quite the opposite, unfortunately. But time is God's greatest gift to humanity. And how you fill that's going to be your choice, but time is sanctified. It's holy. God declares the seventh day to be holy. There is no astronomical phenomenon. There is for a month, there is for a year. Right, but a week is nothing. It's totally biblically created, the week. Do you understand that? 365 days, so the earth rotates around the sun. 28 and a half days, the earth rotates around the moon. So we have a lunar cycle, we have a solar cycle, but the 7 days is nothing. It's all biblical. The world celebrates 7 days because of the Bible. It's an amazing concept. And so in Israel, the work week is Sunday to Thursday. Sunday is a regular day in Israel. It's a school day, it's a work day. On Friday, it's called Erev Shabbat, the Sabbath Eve. And we spend all day Friday preparing, cooking, shopping, getting ready. You have the best foods on the Shabbat. You have everything prepared. It's a frenetic, exciting day. And then suddenly, the last thing everybody does, the last 2 hours, is taking showers. Everybody showers quickly, and you get dressed beautifully. And Jews are the only ones that have on our calendars minutes. Shabbat will start, it'll start at 4:53, exactly when sundown is. So right now, it's the winter, so we know exactly. The only ones that have minutes on our calendars. And Shabbat will end at 5:06. And those minutes are incredibly sacred. Everything Friday, frenetic pace, stops. And you walk on the streets in Jerusalem. Okay, there are some people who don't, not everybody keeps, it's quiet. People are just walking, spending time with family. Is there anything more precious and more special than that? I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
And for those who don't have any kind of Sabbath in their life, I feel like the joke's on you. You know, it's something that there's almost nothing that can contribute greater to your family and to your children. You know, and I know that's an issue in the church, it's an issue in the synagogues, keeping our kids connected. And having that space is beautiful.
Yeah. I remember we spent Friday afternoon at the market watching
Right,
just
exactly.
the craziness of everybody coming to buy the spices and the food and the bread and everything that would be prepared. And then as the sun is setting, it's just everything changes. All of a sudden, there's no cars on the street. And you see people begin to walk. And we begin to walk down to the Western Wall, spent that time of prayer down there. And my challenge to you, and you're saying, oh, how do I put this into context? What do I do? My challenge in this series has been very countercultural. And it's a weird thing to do in January because we're supposed to be doing 25 principles for, your New Year's resolution and just try harder and get in shape. But, man, by doing less, sometimes you do more. And doing the right things and the things that replenish your life and your heart, you actually show up as God intended you to. And what do those Sabbath rhythms look like for you? How do you reclaim what's been lost? How do you fight against the culture of saying, you know what, consume your life with a million different things? How do you fight against that to say, you know what, I want God to reclaim this place in my life? And when you do that, God does transform you. And what does that look like for you? How can we take some principles? I've learned so much from Moshe over the years and just him and our friendship together. And this is one of the things that he's spoken into my life. And when I look and see the rhythms that they have, there's an appreciation of, man, that is something that God, even Genesis 2 says, man, this is a gift. And then it's reiterated again in Exodus chapter 20. And then in Deuteronomy, you get it again. Why is that? It's because God has designed us from the beginning that we are finite and we are limited, and that he wants us to refresh and renew. And my challenge is that, again, I've said this every week in this series, is I can't lay hands on you and the spirit of Sabbath come upon you. You have to go home and make changes. You have to do something. We were talking as a staff this week, what does this look like in our life? I want you to know this as a staff, we always go first. We don't preach something from this stage, whether giving or anything that we don't do in our personal life. And we were talking about what does it look like for us. And there's this thing with our staff right now, I think Pastor Jim started it, where he says, you know what, I don't go to bed anymore with my phone next to me. My phone is in another room. And Justin Miles this week, he was in the car with me. He said, I bought a alarm clock on Amazon. I said, they still sell alarm clocks? I didn't know that, He said, yeah, because I need an alarm clock now because I keep my phone in another room. And it's just a way of, again, letting go of the tendency to always be connected and always be engaged there. And how can I begin to have those rhythms of renewal in my life? So...
I mean, the Sabbath is, in a way, it's about disconnecting, but it's also about connecting. But it's being connected to the spirituality in your life, right, as opposed to being connected to the phone.
Yeah, and this, truly connected with other people. And how many times, because of technology and because our need to go somewhere, we're never truly connected with people. We're always like on the way to somewhere else. Well, what happens if you didn't have anywhere else to go? Right? I mean, just this week, we did a little staff retreat. We went away for a day, right, to do some strategic planning. Well, that night, we didn't have anywhere to go because we were all staying at this cabin. So we spent time in prayer, and there was nowhere to be. That changes things, doesn't it? Like, you're able to stay present in the moment because it's like you're not like this or you're not like this, having somewhere to go and reclaiming some of that. How do we reclaim that for our kids? I want my kids to grow up in an environment where, there is a genuine, they know there's times where it's just us as a family. They know there's times where we're not going to do that or do this because we want to reclaim that time. And that's a beautiful thing. And what I find out in the midst of that, it actually does transform us. It changes us. Like I talked about last week, it's that fourth commandment is the hinge commandment that keeps us to the first commandment and locked into the 10th commandment of not coveting and not being tied to our possessions and our things, and it frees us. And so, I'm so thankful that Moshe. Would you give a big hand for Moshe just for being here?
Thank you.
Yeah. If you want to connect with him, he'll be in the lobby. He's got some of those raffle tickets that promotes the Global Alliance of Israel, his organization that does an incredible job in building those bridges between the Christian community and the Jewish community. Also, if you're interested in that trip, please stop by the Connection Corner. Tiffany will be out there. This is really the last chance if you want to go. If we don't have a lot of signups for this one, we'll need to push that trip back, but we'd love to be able to go this time around if you're interested in doing that. What I've asked Moshe to do is just end us with the blessing that they do during their time of Shabbat. He's going to do it in Hebrew, and he'll kind of explain it to us. So if you would, just stand with me where you're at.
So this is the blessing we give to our children. You put your hands on their head and you say this blessing, and then with our kids, after we finish the blessing, they ask us to tell them a secret. So we have to share, I'm not going to tell you it's a secret. I can't ruin that. But you put your hands on the head. We recite this blessing, and it's the blessing that the priests, it's called the Aaronic blessing. The Bible talks about a blessing that they gave to the people in the temple. So this is how it goes, and I'm going to say it in Hebrew. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. And it ends with the word shalom, which is peace, and we say amen.